My name is Alexa Bommersbach, and I conducted research on global warming. I learned that global warming is real, but I also have been trying to understand why others maybe don't believe in global warming or why they're trying to disprove it. I first read an article, or it was actually an entire book, by James Haugen, and his book was called Climate Cover-Up: The Crusade to Deny Global Warming. And Haugen actually amazed me because he came right out in the beginning of his book and said that he's not a scientist, he's not a researcher, he's a lawyer, but he wrote this entire book on why global warming is not real. And in his book, he states that global warming is not real. If so, it's positive because plants need carbon dioxide to breathe, so actually having a lot of cars and things giving off emissions will help the plants grow and thrive, and we'll actually have a much greener environment with global warming. Haugen uses the downplay aspect in Hugh Rank's model of persuasion, and he's definitely downplaying in this quote because cars, planes, buses, pretty much anything that gives off emission, he's saying that it's okay because it'll make the plants better, but he's completely hiding the fact that in Los Angeles, people can't even see out their windows at certain times of the day because there's so much smog from the amount of traffic and buses and all of that. So he's hiding that fact completely. And I also just personally believe that there's a huge difference between the carbon dioxide that we breathe as humans and then the carbon dioxide that is manufactured and that cars produce. There's a huge difference. He also uses Fisher's narrative because he wrote an entire book, so he was using a narrative form. He used the word I, he had research in there, but he also was taking his personal experiences, so it was in a narrative format. And the book does have coherence, it ties together, and it really caused me to think about what he had to say, rather than to just say, oh, he doesn't agree with me, I'm going to ignore it. So he at least really wanted me to think about his viewpoint. And Haugen does not have fidelity. He does have coherence, but he doesn't have fidelity just because it doesn't ring true with my experience. He's lacking credibility just because he doesn't have a science background. Honestly, if a scientist wrote this book, I probably would believe it a little bit more. Maybe not to the full extent that I believe the other articles that I read, but I would believe it a little bit more if he was more credible. And yes, he published the book, yes, he conducted research, but he didn't make his own experiments. Haugen lastly used the normative influence because he was talking about how a long time ago everyone believed that the earth was flat. And now we look back on them and laugh at them and say, the world's clearly round, why would they ever think that it was flat? He's basically saying that eventually people are going to look back on us who believe in global warming and kind of laugh at us for believing in it. So he's using that normative influence for us to feel like that it's not the social norm to believe in global warming. I do believe that since I am knowledgeable on global warming, that Haugen's book was not persuasive. I firmly believe that it wasn't persuasive just because he wasn't credible, and I think it's kind of funny because all the other articles that I read that persuaded me were not persuasive, they were simply informative. I do believe, though, that Haugen did have a lot of research, evidence, and examples, and he didn't persuade me to believe what he was believing, but he at least persuaded me to really think and try to believe him. Even though I didn't succeed at believing it, I at least tried rather than ignoring his viewpoint completely. Like I said, I simply think that he's lacking a lot of credibility, which is the biggest issue in this, and his reasoning didn't match with mine. I'm an extremely open-minded person, and I try to look at everybody's viewpoints, but I just couldn't consider his opinion. I really try not to be biased and keep an open mind, and I even did that with the articles that I read that were for my viewpoint. I really liked John Hudton's article because he conducted his own research and he has direct experience, unlike Haugen, who has indirect experience and just did research. Also, Kenneth Green wrote an article not on why global warming is real or why it's not real, but he wrote it on saving the environment, and I really enjoyed his tactic to it because he was more understanding. He was for saving the environment, and he said how David Suzuki said that the government should regulate emissions on cars and houses. And Green admitted that Suzuki's going a little bit overboard with that statement, and he's trying to relate to everybody. He's still keeping one side, so it's not completely unbiased, but he's still trying to relate to other people and being realistic, rather than just agreeing with anyone with any opinion that anyone on the side is saying. So I really thought that Kenneth Green and Hutton reinforced my beliefs and made them a lot stronger. And Green made me consider government regulations on emissions. I understand it's difficult for the government to regulate everything that we do, and that some cars already have regulations before they could go out to be sold. But if the government tries to regulate how much CO2 that we're producing, then that could allow us to go green, because I feel that the billboards and commercials and advertisements to go green aren't as effective as if the government just forced us to go green. Also, I would like to add that John Hutton mentioned that adaptation is possible if all else fails. We could adapt to a new environment if something happens to our planet. So in conclusion, I analyzed the opposing viewpoints, as well as learning that global warming is real. I enjoyed seeing the different perspectives nevertheless. I would like to conclude with a question for everybody. What are you going to do to end global warming? It could be something big or small. Thank you.